Hello, greetings. Adamas.
Hi.
Adamas
Yes.
Incendia. It's this is a call that's going to be going onto the Soul Science seminar workshop in Adam's calendar. So I just wanted to welcome you really to the
Thank you,
conference, to the
madam.
seminar. I know we've spoken a couple of times, but nothing officially for the conference. So maybe would you like to give a little introduction about yourself, specifically about the book that you wrote, just to give the audience a bit of a context?
Okay, well, the book Buddha Bratz, A Modern Tale of Enlightenment is basically my story through my own mind and out the other side to liberation using anything and everything I could find. It focuses quite strongly on non-traditional methodologies, the uses of various drugs, fear, heartbreak, a whole range of unusual sadhanas, means to enlightenment, in order to free oneself from the clinging horror of the mind. I mean, the core thing there is really the Dzogchen, the great perfection, just seeing the perfection in everything. And it's one thing talking about that, but it's another thing actually being in the horror of a broken heart or a drug psychosis and still maintaining your presence and seeing the perfection. And the book is really about that. It's about seeing how everything fits together perfectly, and you never get more than you can handle, but everything is an interplay of forces, and you being the nexus of this interplay, seeing yourself in that position, the position of the all-victorious, confident world ruler. That space is what's required to actually free yourself from suffering. And I mean, that's a lot of the stuff is visionary in the book, so it's dealing with my visions, but once again, not a hard and fast thing. Visions being a fluid, like, if you like, stream from your own subconscious or superconscious in order to update you on the nature of reality. So, but not holding hard and fast to that, realizing that visions can and do change as one evolves oneself. And as you peel away certain aspects of yourself, the visions become clearer. I mean, one of the themes in the book is the apocalypse, and that was always been a strong theme in my world. Not theme, but like daylight vision theme, but just what ran through my whole existence. But for example, just to elicit that point, in the beginning I used to think, well, find a gate through space and escape out of this plane. And then as the visions went along with that, like I was looking for a place in the Great Rift Valley where I'd seen this rift where I could actually escape the planet with some friends of mine. And then I realized, well, there's no need to go anywhere. It's like, let everyone else leave and let those who the enlightened actually stay and get rid of everyone else. And it's the evolution of this vision and the metamorphosis of the view, which is what the book's about. I mean, there's a lot in that book. And I mean, I've tried to focus quite strongly on technique, the skillful means of enlightenment, how one can use traditional and non-traditional means to enlightenment quite loosely and broadly once you understand their true nature, and then play with them more quickly. I mean, one of the Buddhist statements is about getting to the island of jewels, which is synonymous with enlightenment, is cross quickly to the other side. Now, the key word there is not the crossing or the other side, but is the quickly, because in the process of traversing one's ego state, there's a lot of, it tends to reassemble, but if you can do it fast, then you can often break free with a lot of the chains. Then you're sort of surfing ahead of the wave as opposed to being dragged along and keelhauled. And a lot of my methodologies in the book, or they come out in the book, are about a speedy traversal to the island of jewels, and how I can use, anything from hardcore narcotics to extreme emotional trauma to consuming of raw poisons to, I mean, the list goes on, but I've tried to explore in the book a lot of these things. I mean, it's all based on personal experience, and part of the ethos of the book is like, well, in spite of whatever is written, personal experience is king. That's really what it comes down to. If you've had the experience, no one can take that away from you. That's something you cannot doubt, and it's that space which you can use as a bedrock to build your, castle of liberation, for want of a better word. Yeah. So that's really the gist of the book. I mean, it's a really fun tale. I've tried to make it entertaining as well as very useful as a technique. I mean, there's some of the techniques in there like homeopathy. I'm a homeopath, which can't really be used that easily. I mean, well, the one example I use there is just paying attention to the reflection. What we're drawn to is often the remedy state we need. So, in that sense, people can use it. But obviously, homeopathy needs a lot of more back learning than the other Buddhist techniques, which can actually be applied quite simply and easy. Like that technique of crazy wisdom, of just trusting implicitly the reflection and just diving in and running with it, is a bona fide, a hard and fast Buddhist technique, which can be applied and used by anyone, and is actually considered one of the fastest means to enlightenment, because one so totally trusts the experience as the play of one's own mind that one can leap in and just literally open doors as they arise in front of you without doubt. So, I mean, one of the core tenets of Dzogchen is give up the disease of effort, right? And that's what I've tried to show in the book, is like how the whole process of enlightenment is a giving up of this disease of struggle and effort and hassle and mission. And a lot of what I'm doing homeopathically at the moment is actually moving beyond traditional homeopathy into more like an alchemical, transformative reseeding of archetypal forms, so that people can actually, I mean, the image I've been using lately, which has come to me, is like, so the eagle's flying so fast that the mud just flies off the wings as one moves forward. So this is, it's part of the Buddha bread ethos, which I don't bring out in the book that much, but is to bring any system to its fullest expression. So, and the fullest expression means to delve into it alchemically and to actually go beyond the traditional expression. Like homeopathy was started about 200 years ago, but it's evolved, but it needs to keep evolving. It needs to actually go into its true potential, and this is really what I'm unlocking here. And the book is really about that. It's like unlocking your true potential, living your dreams, not in a boring, silly way, but like in a real-time, hardcore way of like, well, okay, let's step into the fire and come out slightly burnt, but basically unscathed and transformed. I mean, the Phoenix mythology comes up very strongly. I've got a lot of I mean, I touch briefly on the creation myths as well in the book, because that's also important, because if we know where we've come from, we know where we're going to. And, I think a lot of the misunderstanding in this day and age is people not really knowing how they fit in, seeing, they're externalizing a lot of stuff, seeing the Annunaki as external to self or God as external to self. And part of my mission is the breaking of that duality, to re-internalize it, to take back the power inherent in it. I mean, I know you wanted to talk about the Anunnaki in particular, I mean, or not in particular, but as one of the themes there. And part of that is, part of my vision around that, having seen a lot of this, is that we were the Anunnaki and we actually spliced our own DNA into some local primate in order to upgrade that, but to have a full Earth experience through 10, 20,000 incarnations, however long it was, but to actually get back to the point where we descend into matter. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure you know the mythology around Inanna and her descent into the world, where she takes off her gems and she comes down into the world, and each removal of a defensive, like she takes off a shield and then she takes off a necklace, and each one of these is a descent through the chakras, and then she's stuck in hell without her powers. And part of the Buddha Bratz movie and this movie is to take back the accoutrements, the rings, the jewelry, which symbolize the different powers and levels of understanding, and the chakras as one moves up. Take all that stuff back and arise back to one's true potential, which is Anunnaki fused with human, and play everything to the fullest, basically. I mean, it's a lot to talk about in a couple of sentences, but I mean, that is the mention, that is really the vision of like the descent into form, and then the reascent, because there's a lot talked about Inanna's descent, but there's not that much talked about her ascent, which is really where we're at. I mean, as the Kundalini rises through the different chakras, this is what we're doing. It's Inanna's ascent, so that the base, the raw power of the feminine unites with the crown, the thousand-petaled lotus, which is 1,000 powers, and in that uniting, there is a fusion, a lovemaking, whatever you want to call it, but a dissolution of both, so that we are no longer male or female, but we are male and female, and we have the powers of both. And there's no longer any left-right brain conflict, because it's not like the left foot's squabbling with the right arm, because they're working as one. And that really is the message of the Kundalini and the descent of Inanna and the reascent of Inanna. And I think a lot of the fear around, oh, the Anunnaki enslaved us to mine gold and blah, blah, blah. I mean, another vision I had around the gold thing is like, yes, quite possibly we created ourselves in order to extract the gold, because gold is actually used to reseed atmospheres. So it's a very useful thing to have. And now it's all sitting there. It's sitting in places like Fort Knox and various banks. It's sitting there waiting just to be retrieved. So, I mean, in a sense, that mission was successful. It's like where mankind fits in this equation. I don't know. I mean, just have to look at the floating islands of plastic out there, and I mean, just the horror that mankind's perpetuated, to realize that something has to be done. Yeah, and my personal solution is that is to raise the frequency, so that everyone who can ride the whirlwind will get through, and the rest of them will return to light, which I see as the most compassionate way of A, liberating humanity, and B, saving the planet. So that, I mean, if there's maybe 5 or 10,000 people left on the planet, that'll be enough. Nothing will be lost. All the lineage strands will be carried with. Each person who will be there after I mean, it's kind of like the Noah's flood, but in reverse, but a far more high-tech version of it. As the frequency raises, those who have raised their own energy, their own Kundalini, will be able to navigate these intense energy spaces, and everyone else will return to the essential constituents, which is light. But in that sense, they will not suffer. And this is my vision of the end times, and it's happening all the time. What I realized as well as part of my journey is that there's no end point. It's all point instant, part of the journey. And this, for me, one of the things I had to let go of was the waiting for the apocalypse. Living as if I would only be happy and be complete when it actually occurred. But that's every day is a personal apocalypse. Every day is a melting down. And yes, it does come closer to an end point. But to live as if this was all there is at every moment is part of the enlightenment process. And where we go with it, I mean, at the end we can only really follow our hearts. We know what is right in our hearts. We know what is right in ourselves. We know what we need to do intrinsically, and it's really just a question of listening to that, which is, yeah, that's really the message, the Buddha Brat message. I mean, that's why it's a modern tale of enlightenment. The modern important, because so much of the enlightenment tales, when you look back on them, it's 500 years ago, or the Buddha's 2,000 years ago, Padmasambhava 1,000 years ago. I mean, these are tales written then in India, contextualized for that time. But the modern enlightenment tales are like right here, right now. It's like, yes, we're driving around on motorbikes and cars, and we've got cell phones and internet. And with all this tech is obviously symbolic of our interface with reality, but it all has to play into it. We can't exclude ourselves from all of that, because that is as much a part of us as our fingers are. I mean, it's all pure, it's all light. So this is just the manifestation of that. What the part of the message of the book is just the rage. The collateral damage that's being done to the planet, and the brutality with which man's living. And I mean, part of my mission is to, as any bodhisattva will do, is to liberate all sentient beings. That is the mission. And I just realized that there's just too many people on the planet. It's like going the way we're going. We're just consuming too many resources. We're just damaging too much of the environment. And it's no one's fault. It's no one's going to be pinpointed like you're going to be chosen, you're going to be exterminated. It's not like that. My vision of it is the raising of the frequency will do all of that for people. Those who've done the work, who've actually raised their frequency, will surf through it. I mean, I had a vision of it when I dosed the water supply in Cape Town. It actually, that was my gift. The initial gift was to raise everyone's frequency, but what happened was it raised my own frequency, and I was literally feeling myself coming apart at the seams. If my friend hadn't been there forcing me to stay, I wouldn't be having this conversation. It was the body of light, which is literally what I'm talking about, this raising of the frequency. And if we've done the work, we'll be able to maintain some of our personality. Otherwise, everyone will return to the five lights, and that will be dancing light, and they won't suffer anymore. And for me, it is really the most compassionate way to actually proceed, because when you look at the suffering inherent in everyone's existence these days, it's it's crazy, and it's just getting worse. I mean, I've now got a daughter, a year and a half or 18 months, and I've got to look at her future as well. But I've got to play it as if every day this is her life every day. I can't think of the whales that are dying from plastic or the oceans that are being polluted from radioactive waste. I mean, if you think about that, you crumble under it. But if you see this as it's all driving the process of destruction and dissolution and the apocalypse, then it's flawless, absolutely flawless, no error. It's pretty about the whales, we're sad about the whales and the trees, but once mankind is removed from the equation, all that stuff will regenerate. The earth is very strong. It will regenerate. I mean, one of the things you wanted to talk about as well was the earth's Kundalini, the raising of the earth's Kundalini, and it's very much as above, so below, or as within, so without, as we do it in ourselves. So it gets echoed there. But there's also a raising of, as the Earth's Kundalini raises, and part of my mission has been to aid in that process and to facilitate it by unblocking certain locks that were put in place to stop mankind from accessing his full awareness. I mean, this is really the descent into matter. Once again, it was no one's fault. It's just the density of this experience was too much, I think, for most people to not get totally immersed in it and lost in it and lost in the rage or the competitiveness or the sadness or the loss. It's too compelling to get lost in that, to be able to just have the time. The Buddhists talk about a bardo, which is like a space between a space, just to have a space to be able to step back for a moment before you react. That's really what we're looking for. If we have that moment, then we can actually make an informed choice, and a choice that's informed more from the heart rather than just like a reactive pattern based on past damage. And I mean, there is so much damage done from our past. I mean, we all just have to look at our own history. I've spent my whole life just extracting myself from my own childhood and like all the reactive patterning from that, and not getting involved in more patterning through relationships or further family interactions. I mean, this movie's familiar to everyone, and we no longer have the luxury of going to sit in a cave for like 20 years and like eating nettle broth and meditating. So now we have to do it while we're still holding down a job or raising a family, and it's a challenge. But I mean, it's a worthwhile challenge to be. If we can do it in that context, then nothing can challenge your liberation. It's like it's all well and good to like sit in a cave and get enlightenment, but like try living in a city and doing it there. It's much harder, but it just requires more skillful means and a more fluid viewed, realizing that yes, everything is potentially sadhana, is means to enlightenment, and if we view it like that, then we can. Every interaction can be used to free us from this experience, but it really has to be viewed as like, okay, well, this is the most important thing I can do for myself, and I have to do this. And until I've done this, I'm not an impeccable human being, and I'm not really fit to inherit the earth in that sense, because I don't want to perpetuate the same patterns of horror that were perpetuated that got us in this mess in the first place. And I mean, a lot of people talk about everyone's consciousness is raising, and it's like, I see a few people where that's true, but I don't see it on the whole. One just has to look around at a lot of the horror, and like most people just really don't care. I mean, it's brutal, but it's true, and they're happy to continue throwing away more plastic to feed into the oceans, or I mean, it's and these drop in the ocean solutions of like, oh, I'll stop doing this one thing. It's no one's fault, and it's just 6 billion people, and the needs of 6 billion people with less and less resources, more and more pollution. I mean, anyway. I
So,
read.
so let me jump in there for a
Yes.
minute, because there's a lot of things. There's a
Mm,
lot of things to say and sort of different ideas to tie
mm,
in.
mm,
But the one thing, the link is that I'm working. The conference is partly on the site
mm,
called Adam's Calendar,
mm-hmm,
and I'm just wondering, what for you the Adam is, and even the name Adamas. What does it
mm.
mean? And can you make some ties between Adamas and like the original man kind of thing, and how do they fit in to each other. Just anything around that, just as an
Yeah, okay, no, I
idea.
can. All right, well, I mean, the name Adam comes, I believe, originally from the Hebrew, means man, but there's also a Greek derivation. The word Adamas is ancient Greek for the diamond. It's the Latin and the Greek name for the diamond, but it's a Greek word. But from, I mean, the Buddhists talk about it a lot in terms of adamantine awareness, the indestructibility. The symbol they use is the Vajra, yeah, or the diamond. Like it is formed under incredible pressure and temperature. And through that pressure and temperature, it crystallizes and turns a lump of coal, basically graphite, into the diamond. So it's really this transformation through huge pressure and heat that turns us into our diamond-like forms. And as the diamond, we can reflect anything. We have 1,000 faces. We have different facets. I mean, it's a very good model for the human being. It's like use the pressure of the world. I mean, when I was raising my Kundalini in Johannesburg, I remember reading somewhere that large cities, are actually perfect because they actually raise one's frequency. Just the general agitation raises the frequency. So it means one's more able to be in a hyper-excited space, which means it's easier to get the Kundalini moving in the first place and then to keep it moving. So this is, I mean, another left-hand pathway of using the energy of really messed up places. I'm not saying Johannesburg's particularly messed up, but there's a lot of paranoia, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of energy there which can be used to fuel the process. And this is the very same process that I see occurring throughout the world. All the fear that's going on at the moment, that is fueling everyone's enlightenment process. It's basically pushing them to the point is like, well, liberate yourself or die screaming and turn into light. I mean, this is the red flag that's being held up at the moment. It's like this is the challenge. Use the energy that's there. Don't see it as a problem. See it as like a very valuable, skillful means to liberate yourself. The Adams calendar, I must say, I don't know a lot about, so I can't comment directly on that. The reason I chose the name Adamas is, well, it's yeah, very close to my actual name, but it symbolizes for me the indestructibility of the nature of the mind, the fact that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And us being energy, we cannot be created or destroyed. We can change form, absolutely, but in our core, we remain true to ourselves. I definitely believe that if I was in any other form, I would still have this attitude, this mental attitude. I mean, obviously configured in another body. If I was a woman, I'd have different views, but my core essence would remain the same. It's this indestructibility which passes through. I mean, I've had visions of multiple incarnations, and I very much feel that now it's the resurgence in order to mirror finally the 1,000 faces, the 1,000 facets of the diamond, to mirror any reflection that's required. Yeah, like I said, Adam's calendar, I can't comment on too much. I'm sure you guys have got plenty on that, but that's just my take on the actual name, the word, the beginning. I mean, for me, the whole Garden of Eden story, I've actually got a homeopathic remedy made from the yew tree, YEW, Taxus piccata. But the feeling that comes out of the yew tree as opposed to the apple tree is the feeling of being cast out of heaven through no fault of one's own, and then the rage against heaven, which is really what happened in the Garden of Eden. If you run the non-Lilith version, but they're like, oh, not realizing, eat the apple. Oh, now I have knowledge of duality, of self and other, and now like I'm cursed to feel shame and embarrassment. So that was really the descent from the non-duality into the duality. But this particular thread of self-consciousness, and then, oh, I didn't really realize what I was doing, but I made the mistake and I'm damned forever, actually exists as a plant. The yew tree, which is one of the holy trees to the Druids. That's the yew, the oak, and I think it's either the ash or the poplar. But I mean, the yew has this feeling, cast out of heaven through no fault of one's own, raging against heaven, which is really the Garden of Eden story. But the nice thing is that given one has the yew tree, one can use that. If that particular thread runs through you, you can take this remedy, and it's a very deep torture trauma remedy, which I've used in people, sort of descendants of people who've been in concentration camps, this whole feeling of like, why are we being persecuted? What's wrong? I mean, it even comes down to people who believe that the Anunnaki are like using us to mine gold, and like that. It's that whole movie. It's the same movie that's playing out this subtle, disempowered paranoia of like we're being abused by forces greater than ourselves or more powerful than us. Whether it's the Illuminati or the whatever, the NSA or the CIA. I mean, there's a billion different phases to the potential paranoia of who the enemy is. I mean, really, the enemy, if you want to look at it, is the whole of mankind. I mean, people have to point the finger back at themselves, and they have to become self-aware and free of that, or they're just as much of an enemy as any of these Illuminati or any of these bad guys. It's like look at that in oneself, reintegrate the dualities into oneself, and say, well, yes, there's a part of me which is also the oppressor, but I've also been the oppressed, and I've tasted both sides, and from that I will choose to behave humanely because I know what it's like both to oppress and to be oppressed, and the oppressor feels a certain amount of power, but once you've felt the horror of being oppressed, then it's like you're not going into that space again. You're not going to play that. You'll deal genuinely and openly with people because that's what it feels right. It feels right to behave just like that. I mean, part of the cure, in a sense, I see, is for people, and that the Kundalini brings, the raising of the Kundalini brings, is to be able to feel instantly the reflection in other people. If you were able to feel in that moment exactly what you're doing to another person, you behave much more gently towards reality. The ability to brutalize other people, if you could feel what they were actually going through that you were generating in them, that would, just that alone, that would sort everything out. But unfortunately, not everyone wants to raise their Kundalini. It's a potentially dangerous activity, and it's fraught with a lot of stuff. And people really have to want to liberate themselves from suffering. They have to want it so badly they're willing to die for it. That was my feeling. I wanted badly enough. I was willing to die for it, or go insane, or but. And that's why I got it, because I was willing to pay the coin at the door. That's what I was willing to show up. It's like, okay, this is what I'm willing to pay for it. And that's what's required. And most people aren't willing to pay that, which is, well, we have an apocalypse, which is an unveiling. It's an unveiling of truths, yeah? And everyone will play it in their own way, and it'll all be perfect, and everyone will get what they want in the end. But I mean, a lot of the selfishness has to disappear because that's part of the problem. But that's part of the isolation and the duality of not seeing yourself, or seeing yourself separate from everyone else. But once you see yourself as a part of everything, not so much in this like you're another myself or anything, but just literally everything is the play of your own mind. This is part of the Buddhists talk about, they say, take up your position as a Chakravartin, which means a Chakravartin is someone for whom the wheel turns, or a universal monarch, or a world ruler. But it's saying to everyone, take up your position as this. And part of this, the state, is the all-victorious confidence, just knowing, being willing to go out and play openly and happily with everyone else, but feeling like a king or a queen in that. And I mean, I'm trying to replicate some of this homeopathically, and bottle 3 that everyone took on the Wealth in the Bottle trial, that is very close to that space, just this open, abundant feeling. And this is what one's trying to replicate, because if everyone's in that state, then everyone's just going to produce a lot of stuff, and everyone's going to be really happy. And that's the ideal. I mean, the end time scenario keeps changing, but we're always looking for more optimal methodologies to implement so there's minimal suffering and greater happiness for all. So, and it's ongoing, and it's not just me. I mean, this is part of the Buddha Brat message. It's like, let's take this movie, let's play it to the max, and let's turn it into an epic fantasy. Let's turn it into our own personal dream. Because why? Because we can. Because we understand the nature of things as they are, and it's time to play, and it's time to play with our friends. That's the message.
Okay, so I just want to try and go a little bit like over some of the ideas that have been spoken about and just link it to the work, because you're saying quite a lot,
Yes.
and it might be just helpful, I think, for people listening to slow it down a little bit and maybe break it up a little bit. So
Yeah.
um, I'm just going to try and go over some of what you've said and talk a little bit more about what I'm bringing.
Okay.
So for me, the idea of the site is that the it's firstly bringing awareness to a different kind of origins. Okay, so it's repositioning this idea of our origins in the Garden of Eden, and it wasn't just 6,000 years ago, and it wasn't the way that the Bible spoke about it. There's a whole different scenario, and this link to the Annunaki is quite a big leap for some people to think about the fact that there was possibly this advanced intelligence that did this genetic splicing and, that kind of thing. So that in itself is quite a big leap for people. There's another part of that, which is I'm wanting to explore specifically the side of, because there's a family tree, an Anunnaki family tree that I've looked into, because apparently Enlil, Enki, and the half sister, and then her Sag, they were the three pioneers on the genetic engineering project. And a lot of people have focused on Enki, and for me, I wanted to focus a lot on the sister, and just bring some of the feminine perspective, the goddess aspect or the mother aspect out, and explore that a little bit, and look at it, look to see if there are links to the Kundalini moving back up again, this return of the goddess, Inanna returns, Mother Africa, like all these links of how, when we shift from a patriarchal viewpoint of where, everyone's looking towards, I'm just giving this as an example, the male story, how would shifting it to the female story help that Kundalini to move, say, for example, and even in the earth, if such radical imbalance, and I'm not saying that the imbalance was bad, it was just part of the experience of the descent of consciousness. But now, as we turning and moving back up again, I think that for me anyway, females moving back into a position of power, and deconstructing the whole patriarchal thing for themselves, is part of the Kundalini turning in the earth energy. I don't know.
Well, I think in order to answer that, or to reflect on that possibly better than to answer, is like to realize that from Tiamat, the original world dragon, the primordial chaos, which is normally depicted as feminine, I've had a vision of that as well, and it literally is pure chaos, as limitless possibilities. From her body, came all of this. From her body came Gaia. From Gaia came Uranus. From Uranus and Gaia together came the Titans. From the Titans came the gods, and from the Titans also came man. So it's like the whole thing was feminine in origin anyway. So I mean, I don't really. I mean, I understand the need for women to like reclaim their power, but I mean, to doubt that power in the first place it's like clearly ridiculous to me. I mean, one just has to look at from Tiamat came everything, the feminine came everything. So I think it is obviously important for women if they feel the need to reclaim their power. But I mean, for me to doubt their power, I've never doubted it in the first place. So it's like, I know it's a particular jihad amongst certain crews, but I think it risks going to the same extremes that the masculine went to. Now everything's the goddess this, the goddess that, and it's almost like a swing into like feminine oligarchy. I understand that the feminine needs to rise back up and take its original position, and that's as it should be. But the tendency when one does these things is that one swings too far to the other side and antagonizes the masculine, or whatever. The masculine either gets resentful. It's the same story when you look at a lot of political movies. There'll be a fascist theocracy, and then it'll get taken out by a democracy, and then the democracy will get all dictatorial. It'll turn into the same fascist democracy it was trying to avoid in the first place. So this is possibly what I mean, I'm very interested in what you're saying about the sister. I never even heard of the sister before, and like what she brings in as part of the Anunnaki, like what her frequency is. Because I think if we know the hidden players in the movie, it'll make the picture a lot clearer. For me, who did what, where, and when, possibly less important than understanding the nature of their actual roles, like what frequency they're carrying, what they were born or created themselves to do. You know, obviously, if part of your function is to create people, you know, that's one of your functions, you'll have your entire anatomy will be wired around those particular skills that are required to do this. Whereas if your thing is to govern, you'll have more, say, military skills or more, yeah, controlling skills. So I think just bringing her out, like the sister you mentioned, just showing her as a player in the whole thing. I mean, for me, the feminine, there's so many aspects to it. There's obviously the mother, there's the sister, there's the daughter, there's, you know, all of these aspects. There's the lover. It's a complex thing, and I understand where a lot of women are coming from in this, but I do also see the fascist femininity coming in as well, like the male beating in order to feel good about itself. There's a lot of that as well. So one has to be aware of that because that just risks another backflip. And I think this masculine and feminine movies been playing back and forth and like oppressed and oppressors, like the Amazons, you know, them being in control of the men and like dominating them. You know, it's we don't want another flip. We don't want to flip to the other side where now there's this totalitarian feminine rule dominating the men, and the men feel resentful, and then they throw off the woman's power, and it's like seesaw back and forth again. I think if the woman can do it with gentleness and yeah, just take it back without the need to like dominate or like male beat. Yeah, not that the men don't need a bit of beating every now and then, but it's like if they feel oppressed, they will rise up and fight. This is my point. This is the lesson of history. You know, it's the same lesson that went through the Titans. The Titans created the gods, and then the gods started misbehaving, so the Titans ate, or Kronos ate the gods, and then Zeus chopped his way out of the stomach and took his testicles, threw them in the sea, and like basically bound the rest of the Titans in Tartarus for all eternity. It's the same. Oh, we don't like you. We're going to oppress you, and then we're going to. And I mean, the Titans were actually benefiting man because Prometheus, one of the Titans, stole fire from the gods to give to man. So you have to look at it in that sense. Whenever people come from a negative Titan view, they have to remember what the Titans were doing in the first place. They were actually benefiting man, but you know, is that initial thing, yes, Kronos probably shouldn't have tried to destroy or eat his children. Yeah? And it was the doing of that initial act of fear that caused the gods to react and then bind them. And then everything since then has been this back and forth, oppressor rising up, killing, or the oppressed rising up, killing the oppressor. It's this perpetual seesaw. And what I'm saying is like, let's move beyond this stuff. You know, it's time to break the duality of like, left, right, masculine, feminine, break all that stuff down. Sure, retake whatever power you feel you need to take. And like, as you know, I'm fully behind you on that level. But don't go to the other extremes and risk creating another feud, which will just put us back in another 1,000-year cycle of like oppressed oppressor. So that's all. That's my little 5 cents on that.
Yeah, that's important to remember, but I also think that there's a coming right, a coming into balance thing. So like if you think about the mother as in the feminine, as in even the earth, you know, and nature, and kind of how she's had to tolerate so much, and how perhaps her coming back into balance and shaking herself free and loose again, you know, as kind of Tiamat, let's say, for example, as the original mother, just her actual movement out of the old form is might appear a little violent.
It will be very violent for everyone, men
You
and
know,
women,
and
believe me.
so, you know, I think that there's a certain correlation between the mother, Earth,
Yes,
Kundalini, and the feminine journey. I really do.
sure,
I think that
sure.
initially the turning
Yes,
of that
yes,
energy can come through. There can be quite a violence almost to
yes.
it.
No, I
in
totally
its
agree.
righteousness and in its
Mm,
coming
mm,
right in,
mm,
and like trying to
mm,
break out of the
mm,
old
mm.
form. And then, and then it's like we almost have to find our balance. And if you
Yes.
look at what the earth's busy doing, I mean, I think we've had a pretty benevolent time
Mm.
from the earth's changes. I mean, it hasn't been too radically violent yet.
Yes. Yes.
Although we've just had this massive typhoon with
Mm.
10,000
Woohoo!
plus deaths,
Rah rah.
you know.
Fukushima. No, just kidding.
And so, in a way, it's like, I'm just looking at all of that and still hearing you that there's got to be a
Mm,
new balance,
mm, mm.
a new harmony and stuff like that. But I know, my personal journey has been around if I reclaim my place, there's a lot of rage through suppressed stuff, and so
Sure,
it's like
sure.
I have to go sort of almost through the rage to
Yes.
find my
Yeah.
balance again.
No, sure, 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 sure.
Kind of,
All I'm saying is like by tarring it all as like the masculine, as like injustice against the masculine, what I'm trying to point out is that this imbalance of oppressor and oppressed is a universal story that's gone on since the beginning of time through the sexes, through the cultures, through the different powers, through the dynasties. It's the story of the world. And my point is like, it's time to change that movie. We've played that a million times and it's boring. It doesn't work. It doesn't bring lasting change. It just brings extremes, and out of those extremes, I mean, even democracy, it ends up as the tool of big business. So it's not really the ideal form of government anyway. So it's better than a lot, but there are better versions. So
and I
yeah.
think I think the whole idea of, so let's say we're all rebirthing in a way, and we're all trying to
Mm,
find our new self, our new story.
mm,
And it's like, well, actually, no one's going to really tell us what that is, because that's part of this new paradigm, is that
sure.
we say we
Yes.
must create it.
Yes. Yeah.
We
Totally.
must take
Totally.
responsibility for what that is. And so
Totally.
it's a bit of a, I mean, I think the reunification thing, the moving into unity consciousness, which is linked to the Kundalini journey,
Mm,
um,
mm,
is part of that. So, like you say, like owning opposites, for example, or owning a polarized state. So, if
mm,
think you're the oppressed, then look at where
mm,
you've been the oppressor and
mm,
start
mm,
to
mm.
dissolve those polarities. I
Sure.
think
Sure.
that is definitely the work to be
Mm,
done.
mm, mm.
Um, and then it's like, okay, so how do we even begin to imagine something that we don't know or can't remember or haven't experienced yet?
But you see, this is the nature of vision. This is the nature of the visionary path, to actually take the visions one gets either in dream space or in real time, like as one sits, and use those visions to guide us through the walkways. I mean, I've used my visions at various times as like pins. I've pinned it over there. It's like, okay, I know where I'm going to get to. I know how I'll feel. I've had a vision and a taste of that. So I'm just drawing myself to that point and using that vision as I like stick the tongue out, tink, taste it over there, and then I draw myself to the end of the tongue, which is
Okay.
stuck to the wall. I draw myself to it. So I mean, it's a very snake analogy, but it's a fairly accurate one of how one uses visions. I mean, if one doesn't have actual vision, one knows. I believe everyone knows in their heart what is right and what is wrong and what needs to be done. Yeah, it's
So
just there's so much
it's to
pain.
open to vision is what you're saying, to open to sight,
Always.
to
But
seeing.
not everyone is a visionary. Not everyone has that visionary capability in its fullest aspect. Some of them have empathic stuff. They have emotional stuff. They have some of them. Their physical body might be. I've run into people where the physical body is almost like an organ of sense, the whole body, and they react with the environment almost like a sponge sucks up water. So it's different people have different powers, different abilities, different sensing mechanisms, and to realize that everyone's path is different. There are some people who will have similar abilities to oneself, and those people are often your friends because you can actually talk to them in the same language. But it's really to trust yourself and to realize, like, look into yourself, find your greatness, in a sense, your abilities, your natural, what you were born with, your inheritance, your birthright, and actualize that. Just run with it, trust it implicitly. It's like, oh, this is me. I trust myself because it feels right, and I'm not going to doubt myself, right? Because this is, I know this, that feeling of, I know this is right with every molecule of my body. Taking that is like, this is my birthright. This is the state I want to be in all the time, and I'll follow that. And if I'm not, I'll try get back to it. I mean, I use homeopathy a lot to, like, tap myself back into these spaces to remove stuff. But I mean, well, a lot of what I'm working with now, like the royal jelly, that the stuff I did with that and the light of Jupiter, was just to put people in a state of, like, I feel fucking fabulous. Yeah, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna interface the world from an open, powerful spot. I'm not gonna oppress anyone. I'm gonna give to the world my best, and the best will come back to me as an automatic birthright. I don't even care if it comes. I'm having such a fabulous time anyway. I don't really care what comes back. And as a result, all sorts of wonderful stuff comes back, and then it's even more cherries on top with cream and sprinkles.
That's
So
nice
that's the ideal.
because part of the unpacking of the story of this Adam's calendar site for me has been around. It's almost been like going back into. It's almost like how you described what happens with the Kundalini, which is when the Kundalini starts to turn, all these old memories that are stuck in the body start to surface. And they just start getting pushed out of the body. And in a way, I feel like that about the site. And I feel like, and that the earth is doing the same thing. So it's like the earth's energy is shifting. And while it's shifting, it's throwing out all these kind of almost mirages of the old story in the body.
Yes.
And that, part of the intention of this weekend is to I found the movie Inception quite a good idea. It's like to incept, to place a new mind or a new dream into the old one. If the old mind was, the old game, the old movie or whatever, as that's moving out, how can we lay a new intention in a sense? But, so I do want to lay an intention for the new earth, essentially. The birthing of ourselves into this new paradigm, this higher frequency place. And that's it. I think that's actually the full intention of the weekend, and not do much beyond just laying down seeds of intention and just being present with, these old images that are passing through and out of me. But I mean, it's been one of the most intense pieces of work I've ever done in my life.
I'm sure.
And I mean, the more I've got so many visions and downloads from the site. I mean, I was just chatting to another friend of mine who's a homeopath as well, and he and I were just saying, it's almost like that it's like the Lord of the Rings story in some ways. That's one part of the story. It's like, okay, the Annunaki has had this ring of power on the earth to some extent. And it's almost like the old ring of power, and all of its placements and stuff has to be dissolved. And, and then like put into this cauldron, this kind of fiery cauldron, and then recoagulated, basically. It's almost like the old mind or the old. I even saw it as a ring, and I even saw this ring almost like a conception ring. So I don't know what you would call that, like when you block conception in a female uterus or whatever. What do you call that? Like when a woman can't conceive because she's put her own birth control.
Yeah, like an IUD or a coil or a loop or
Yeah, and it was like the vision for me was like taking that out
Mm.
of the earth in this particular
Mm.
place and site, and allowing a shift in that grid to happen,
Mm.
so that
Mm.
so that the birthing of the earth could happen.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And obviously, I know that that has to be in me
Mm.
and in everybody who's busy and
Mm.
ready.
Yes. Yes.
But anyway, so there's the Mount Doom
Mm.
process, and there's
Mm.
these power
Mm.
Mordor, and and
Mm.
there's
Mm.
even in the mountain that I'm working in, there's this vision of these kind of old ghosts that are trapped in the mountain that were like the army,
Right, of the dead. Yes.
right,
Yes.
and it's almost like that. It's like there's
Yeah.
this vision of these people that might still be caught in, and
Mm.
me including,
Mm.
as this feeling of enslavement,
Mm.
and how to
Mm.
like start to let these
Mm.
ghosts come out,
Yes. Yes.
address them, and
Yes.
say,
Yes.
you're actually not a slave anymore.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not a ghost anymore,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and this is how you get out.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
And so that's kind of part of the work as well.
Yeah.
And I think what you said right at the beginning, which is to take back the power and say, we are the Anunnaki,
Mm. Mm.
which is linked to the Inanna Return story. I don't know if
Mm.
you've ever read that book,
Mm.
where she, the idea that the gods made these humans and the humans were slaves for one piece of the story. And
Mm.
then eventually, to evolve that genetic, the gods had to incarnate into the human form because
Mm.
this was their
Mm.
creation. They
Mm.
had to remake the DNA to make it godly
Yes.
DNA. So,
Yes.
and then that was part of the completion of the project.
Yes.
And
Just
sort of, yeah.
Just something you said there, I mean, about the melting pot, just throwing the ring into the fire. I mean, one of the other practices I do, chod, which means to cut. It's a Buddhist practice, where you chop yourself up and offer yourself to the different realms as part of the breaking of the ego. I mean, one of the most powerful chod visions I had was actually burning myself repeatedly on San Pedro, like burning and burning and burning myself in this cauldron, in this atomic furnace, basically, intense heat, melting myself down till I almost became like fluid, and then recasting myself in like 4 or 5 different frequencies. I will now overlay myself as like tiger, falcon, rainbow, different frequencies, reformatting myself. But firstly, destroying all the old, as you talk about, all the ghosts, all the memories, all the slavery, all that stuff, the stuff that's holding us back, all our chains, melting off all our chains, whether they're conceptual or figurative or literal or whatever those chains might be. I mean, we're most often chained by memory. So just destroying all that stuff and boiling it up, boiling it and boiling it and boiling it and boiling it and boiling it until it boils clean, and then like, okay, well now I'll make a new mold of myself. And then I'll put myself in the cradle of mankind. I'll rebirth myself, and as a reborn creature, I will then take up my position as a Chakravartin for whom the wheel turns. I mean, that's from the Buddhist thing of like, you're stuck on the wheel of birth and death. The Buddha says he's standing above the wheel, traditionally saying, like, move beyond the wheel. So someone who the wheel turns for means you can be in any of the realms. You can be a god, you can be a demon, you can be a ghost at any moment and yet come out of it seamlessly. This is the freedom from suffering that is the inheritance of the Kundalini done properly and reforging yourselves. And one of my things is like, from the ashes of the atomic fires, because this is really the state of this time now, this intense crucible type feel of like reburning yourself, melting it all
Reforging.
down,
Right.
reforging yourself completely. Take yourself to Mount Doom, check yourself in, and reform yourself. Because like, what happens with the ring is the ring returns to its essential thing. All Sauron's power gets disseminated back into the world, which is what you really want. You want to take it all back, break all the concepts, that are holding us here, and reform yourself. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I think it's very, very much a worthwhile thing to be doing at this point. I mean,
It's
to
very
re-see this
exciting,
thing.
isn't it? It's
Very
exciting work.
exciting. Yeah, I
So
know. And I think just
I'm
holding that
thrilled.
intent alone, if that's just the sole intent of this
That is
conference,
the
just doing
intent.
that, That's very
neat.
powerful, especially just to get a whole group of people together. So to do it en masse at the original site, very powerful. I'll definitely be there with you in thought, huh?
Thank
Because
you.
that's
I
been my
very
whole
much
mission.
appreciate that. You can hold the one aspect while I'm
I'll
doing the
hold
other
it. I'll
aspect.
stick the pole into the ground and weld it with my own blood.
Lovely. Thank you. So listen, we're coming to the end of an hour, and I think
Okay.
that's enough for one
Okay.
recording. We'll see how we go in terms of just getting closer to the conference. This is obviously a pre-recording.
Okay.
We haven't so easily been able to find Wi-Fi because it's in the mountains and stuff like
Yes.
that. So
Yeah.
we'll just take it as it goes. But
Yeah.
just thank you so much for your
Always a pleasure.
amazing contribution and your fantastic presence and your work and everything. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
your
Well,
contribution.
thank you for showing up, yeah, for being so enthusiastic about the whole thing, because that's an important part of it as well, for bringing everyone together, because that's equally important, yeah. It's to have someone who's like rousting the troops and getting everything moving. It's important, yeah. It's a fundamental thing, and it's like if you want to look at those aspects of maybe the aspects of the feminine which have been held down, maybe these are some of the aspects, the reunification of people, the drawing everyone together from nothing. As you said, you've run this conference on, hair in a thought form. It's like it's being brought forth from mind space and like cast in form, and like, yeah, more power to you. Yeah, I'm behind you all the way. Rock and roll.
Thank you. Thank you
All
so
right.
much. Well, sending love, and we'll be sending
Okay.
love when we watch this as well
Cool.
from
All
that
right.
site at the top of the mountain. And
Okay.
we'll see you again soon.
Cool, Amanda. All right.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
Adamas. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.